Let's get ready for opening day. Not baseball, Keeneland. Let's talk about the graded stakes races with my good friend, Sara Elbadwi. Salutations and welcome, friends. I'm your host of this episode of Trust the Profits. My name is Matthew DeSantis, and you can find me on Twitter at the handle at Failed to Menace. Well, welcome to the opening gate day graded stakes preview of the three graded stakes races taking place at Keeneland. It's always a great day. We love opening day at Keeneland. We get 2-year-old races, 4.5 furlongs, probably going to get won by Wesley Ward horses, but I digress. Those are early in the card. We're going to talk about some really exciting stakes races later in the card. One listed stakes race, 2 graded stakes races. But before we get to that, just a quick reminder, if you haven't already, press that subscribe button and make sure to subscribe to Trust the Profits. We have all the horse racing content you need, from live betting on Thursday nights to Kentucky Derby previews to graded stakes previews, capping the card, race recaps. We have something for everyone here on Trust the Profit. So make sure to press that subscribe button. Make sure to like this video and also comment below with what's your best bet on opening day at Keeneland and who do you like in these 3 graded stakes races. Well, to honor opening day at Keeneland, I wanted to bring on a very special guest. And here to join me is someone who has been on the show a few times before, and I always enjoy talking to her about horse racing. And she used to be at Horse Racing Nation, but now she's at NYRA, moving on up. And here to join me is Sara Elbadwi. Sara, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking Keeneland on opening day.
Absolutely. Happy to be back with you. Nice to reunite finally with another Trust the Profits appearance, and so looking forward to Keeneland opening day. I was anxiously refreshing my entries button to see when those races would come out. So glad they're out and we can now get handicapping and looking forward to chatting about these stakes on opening day with you.
Absolutely, yeah. And so there's 3 obviously headlined by the Grade I Ashland, which is a Kentucky Oaks prep race. We'll get to that one last, but that's got some real heavy hitters in it. I think some potential difference of opinion. I have some hot takes for that race, but we'll save that in a second. Let's dive into the first of the 3 stakes races. And I'll be honest, Sara, even though this is a listed stakes race, I felt like this was really a graded stakes level race. The way that the Lafayette Stakes came up, 7 furlongs for 3-year-olds on the dirt. Your morning line favorite is Bob Baffert's Hijazi in this race, followed closely by Brad Cox's Corona Bolt. You see a horse like Gulfport coming back from a little bit of a layoff, Determinedly, who's on the Derby Trail, Lugan Knight, who is on the Derby Trail. I mean, these are a lot of really big name horses. So I'm going to kick things off to you. When you look at this race, how are you feeling about this one? Where are you leaning? How do you think this race is going to play out?
Is this not the we tried the Kentucky Derby and then we're not going to make it race? Is this not exactly what this is?
It is. It is. I really think it's kind of, we can't get the distance, and we're going to become sprinters. And I'm glad, because I like that division quite a bit. You know, reminds me a little bit of a horse like Gunite last year, who kind of cut back and became a really nice sprinter as a result. But yeah, it very much shows a lot of former Derby Trail contenders who are no longer contenders.
Right, and this is a good matchup for all of them to meet in here. And with this race, I see a lot of speed on paper, particularly from the outside with Hurricane J, who everyone remembers is the one that really pressed Cave Rock in that Breeders' Cup
Mhm.
Juvenile, where Forte was able to sit a good stalking trip and run Cave Rock down in the final stages. And there, obviously, Forte now heading into the Kentucky Derby is your likely favorite, unless somebody really impresses this weekend. And so, with all the speed I feel as though I'm seeing on paper, with not only Hurricane J to the outside, but also horses like Hijazi, Gulfport will probably have to be forwardly placed if he breaks from the rail. Determinedly set the pace and then kind of folded in the Risen Star. I kind of just wanted to use the 2 horses that I thought would sit a better sort of stalking mid pack second flight type trip. And those are the 2, Lugan Knight, as well as the 5 Corona Bolt, who I don't think absolutely needs the lead. And he ran some decent races with his first 2 starts, coming back to win once they cut him back last time out. And the second place finisher in that race did return to run second again. So he's been facing decent company over at Oaklawn. So I would probably just use those 2 and try to scrape by in here, thinking that some of the early speed types might wear each other out.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. A lot of speed in this race, and at 7 furlongs, that's always, I think, an interesting distance, right? I think if you see a lot of speed at 6 furlongs, I go, well, sometimes you just go with the speed of the speed. But I think you start stretching out to 7 furlongs for 3-year-olds. horses can get tired that last half furlong coming down the stretch if they're being pressured the way you said. My top pick is also Corona Bolt. I really like this horse a lot. I really wanted this horse to be able to stretch out successfully, but that was not to be. But love that Brad Cox just immediately pivoted and said, listen, we're taking this horse right back to running at that sprint level. I also like that last time out actually faced older company. And that was something that you don't often see from 3-year-olds, especially this early on in their 3-year-old campaign, facing older company and winning that race. So I thought that was really impressive. I do like this horse. I agree with you. He does not need the lead. If you look at that maiden debut, sat third early and then moved late. Hijazi is obviously a horse that a lot of people are going to be focused on. The Bob Baffert connections are notable. This is a horse that was transferred initially to Yakteen and then went back to Baffert after the Kentucky Derby run was not successful. Here's an interesting statistic about Baffert, though, that I think is noteworthy. He is only 3 for 19 shipping horses into Keeneland over the last 5 years, and 2 of those winners were actually in the Breeders' Cup. So if you eliminate those Breeders' Cup races at Keeneland, he's actually 1 for 17. He's 1 for 8 at Keeneland in races where horses are off Lasix. So there's not a ton of success. This is not Santa Anita or Bob Baffert's hitting 35% of his races. So I think there's some reasons to think that Hijazi, in addition to the pace pressure you mentioned, might just not fire as effectively as he does out in Southern California. The horse that I think I'm, a little bit interested in is also Lugan Knight, who you mentioned. This is a horse that if you watch that Gotham, that was just a bizarre race. And I'm willing to just cross a line right through that race. You had a riderless horse who kind of fouled up the pace because it really dove to the inside. It really affected the way I think a lot of horses ended up running in that race. It was in the slop. It was a very aggressive, fast pace. And I just feel like I'm going to give Lugan Knight another shot. Always trust Louis Saez, 8-1 on the morning line. I think you're getting really good value. So those were the two that I also kind of really took a look at. Gulfport's a horse that, I'll be honest, was just burning money last year towards the end of the year. Always went off as a favorite, rarely ever won. And now first time off the bench. I'll let that horse beat me if he does, especially from the inside rail. So the Lafayette Stakes, I'm glad we ended up on the kind of the same 2 horses up top, but this should be a really fun race to watch and going to be a fast one to watch for sure.
That's the hope. And I mean, isn't freezing point just at least a little bit interesting at 30-1 with one having a running style that should fit this race if it does completely fall apart? I think that he's one that I want to try to use underneath somewhere at a huge price if that's the scenario that I see playing out with the pace in this race.
Yeah, absolutely. And, people always talk about those Turfway Park shippers and obviously coming in from Turfway, but has some dirt experience as well. And you're right. If you think the pace is going to break down, then looking for a horse at a big price to hit the board, I think is very reasonable. Let's move to the Grade 3 Transylvania Stakes, going a mile and a 16th on the turf for 3-year-olds. And we ended up with quite a field here. 12 horses highlighted by your morning line favorite, Carl Spackler for Chad Brown, ridden by Tyler Gaffleone at 3-1. And you talked about speed in the last race. I see a lot of speed in this race too. A lot of horses on the turf who want to be forwardly placed. And I'll be honest, this isn't Gulfstream Park where you want to be forwardly placed on the turf. So I'm a little concerned about a horse like Carl Spackler, who I think is incredibly talented and might be just top to bottom the best horse in the field. But I just don't know how this pace is necessarily going to set up in this race for this horse. Now, he can sit off, no doubt about it, and he can sit third, fourth. He's demonstrated that ability before. But you look at a horse like Duden Colorado, Nagarok, Candidate, Mustache, all these horses like to be forwardly placed or on the lead. As a result, I'm going to take a little bit of a shot and go with the third choice on the morning line, Web Slinger for Mark Cassie and Javier Castellano. This is a horse that's going to come running late. You know where he's going to be early, which is going to be far back. But I think going a mile and a 16th on this Keeneland turf course, you're going to see that great turn of foot. I think at the end, you're going to see a lot of horses, I think, getting tired. Web Slinger is a horse that I've liked a few times riding down at Gulfstream Park, and I just think this pace might set up really well for him. I also think a horse like Wonderful Justice for Brad Cox at 12-1 on the morning line. Interesting horse. Beat and the winner is last time out is 2 for 2 and has won kind of 2 different ways. So has a little bit of versatility. I like that horse to maybe provide a little bit of value underneath, but interested in where you're looking in this one, Sarah.
Yeah, we have some similar thoughts. I like Web Slinger as well. I think that he fits the projected pace scenario in this race too, like you mentioned, with one that can come from a little bit further off of it. But getting to Carl Spackler first, since he is your favorite, I mean, he was second first time out to a horse. A lot of people have a lot of interest in Far Bridge, who seems like he's going to be a good one. And I will say too that this 3-year-old male turf division, we've been lacking with the older turf horses for quite some time now. So it's kind of nice to see a more competitive division for the 3-year-olds. And hopefully that's something that can continue if many of them stick around, because it's nice to have races like this where you feel as though you're
Yeah.
going through and multiple horses do actually have a legitimate chance, instead of being like, well, they all look exactly the same, so who knows who's going to show up in
Yeah.
here. I mean, there's a lot of talented horses, at least from what we've seen so far of them. I do like Nagarok a little bit. I'll forgive his effort last time, as just maybe he needed one after running a big race in the Breeders' Cup and stretching out for the first time in there, where he was third at almost 40-1 behind those two European horses. I don't know that this mile and a 16th is going to ultimately be his ideal distance, since he has only been successful sprinting so far, but he hasn't run badly enough going a route of ground that I'm willing to totally cancel him out. I do like the 8-1 as well. Maybe we do get that with the presence of a Chad Brown horse, as well as some other more high profile connections that have been successful in more stakes races. I really want to like Mo Stash a little bit, but I liked him last time, and I feel like he was kind of supposed to get the job done in there. And the trainer stats in graded stakes races just don't really do it for me at 6-1. I've never been a big fan of And the Winner Is, but if you're into the horses for courses angle, I feel like he's the right price to find out in this situation, drawing closer to the inside than some of the more competitive types that are going to be further out, like Carl Spackler and Dude in Colorado. I just don't love that he didn't really have an answer against similar company when in the Breeders' Cup, and he's faced a couple horses like this before. So we agree for the most part. Web Slinger and Nagarok are where I'll try to go, but I'm not totally against the favorite in this spot.
Yeah, I mean, if Carl Spackler runs a huge race and wins by open lengths, I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, that's how talented this horse is. You're right. Farbridge, who he lost to in debut, I believe just was sold for 2.5 million, if I'm not mistaken. I saw
Oh,
on a
no big
private
deal.
sale. Yeah, no big deal. Just an incredibly talented division. You're absolutely right. Nagarok is a horse I absolutely loved in that Breeders' Cup, and at a big price, and was able to help me out a little bit with the trifecta that day. So I always have a soft spot for him. We just saw Grand Motion win the Gulfstream Park Oaks with Affirmative Lady this past weekend. So always rooting for that barn. I think Nagarot's absolutely a horse that I will want to use. Yeah, it's interesting. And the winner is, I just couldn't really get there on that horse. It's a cool horse. He seems like a hard knocking horse, but from a speed figure standpoint, it just feels like this horse runs the same race kind of over and over again. And you're starting to see this division show some elite company with a horse like Dude in Colorado, with a horse like Carl Spackler, even a horse like Nagarok and Webslinger. You're starting to see a little bit of elevation, a little bit of separation between their speed figures and where and the winner is. But absolutely likes that Keeneland turf course, no doubt about it. 2 wins and 3 attempts over that surface, so it can absolutely do it. And to your point about Mo Stash, interesting statistic: Victoria Oliver 0 for 15 when switching horses off Lasix in graded stakes races. So again, I always like Louis Saez on the turf, but hard to really get behind that one in this particular spot. Well, let's head to the final of the 3 stakes races, and that is the Grade I Ashland Stakes. And this, I feel like, is by far and away the best Oaks prep race of the year that we have seen to this point. You have 3, I think, really legitimate threats to win this, and maybe just to win the Kentucky Oaks as well. In the morning line favorite Wonder Wheel for Mark Casse, who of course is the reigning Breeders' Cup Juvenile Champion. Then you have Julia Shining, the full sister to Malathat, and Punch Bowl, who's an ascending horse for Brad Cox. I'm interested, Sarah, where are you looking? Are you going to look at these 3 favorites, or are you going to try to look past these 3? What are your thoughts?
I think it's hard to look past these 3 because they have such different running styles. I mean, if you're looking for a horse to potentially wire the field, you might want to go to Punch Bowl. If you're looking for a horse that is tactical and can be up close, can come from further back and rate, you're looking at Wonder Wheel. And if you're looking for a pace meltdown and you're looking for a horse to come from far back who also doesn't even need a solid pace in front of her to close and make up some ground, then you're looking at Julia Shining. So you have all the different running styles covered with these three favorites. And for me, it would be hard to imagine that at least one of them doesn't run their race. But it's also fair to be a little bit concerned that last time out, Wonder Wheel and Julia Shining were not able to get the job done in the Sun Coast. And frankly, a little bit disappointing for both of them if you were going to wager on either of them that day with the huge upset winner of that race. However, I believe, and many others do, that there was a significant inside speed bias on that race course that day at Tampa. We saw that play out throughout many different races
Mhm.
that card. So, do you just feel as though they both needed one coming out of big efforts to end their 2-year-old seasons and start their 3-year-old seasons? They were also against the track that day. Do you make the excuse for these two and think they're going to rebound in this spot? Or are you a little cold on them at a short price now after they didn't quite get the job done in there?
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I mean, I think that certainly that Tampa Bay race, the Sun Coast, was absolutely fighting the track. I mean, that was a very speed favoring track. That said, the winner of that race, excuse me, Dreaming of Snow, has come back to run two very poor efforts since then. Now, I say very poor efforts, finished second last time out, but oh, by the way, by 17 and a half lengths to Money's Gold, who might be the best filly in the country right now, actually, regardless of distance or surface. So, um, I think that's something to keep in mind. And yeah, Julia Shining, listen, she's getting the blinkers put on. This is a horse that really does remind you of her sister, Malafat, and that she's just a grinder. But my God, Luis Saez has to really pump hard on this horse to get her going and to keep her engaged the entire way around. I mean, it feels like you just don't think she's ever going to get there because he's just going so hard. And she just keeps grinding and grinding and grinding and making up ground. But in this race, I really am leaning towards Punch Bowl. You know me as well as anyone in horse racing. Young ascending horses with ascending speed figures, I'm a sucker for. But I also think the pace of this race sets up nicely. There's no other speed in this race. Punch Bowl should be able to get out to that lead. You mentioned Wonder Wheel having tactical speed. I agree. I think Wonder Wheel will be forwardly placed. I don't think you're going to see what you saw, for instance, out of the Breeders' Cup where she came from all the way back. But I just think Wonder Wheel is going to get on that lead. I don't think there's going to be a lot of pressure. I think she absolutely is good enough to wire this field. Julia Shining, we'll see if she's more forwardly placed with the blinkers. But I just have a hard time thinking that she's going to get by. And also, we should point out if you're a speed figure person, none of the speed figures for those two, Wonder Wheel or Julia Shining, really pop off the page. I think at this point, it's not like they've wrote a big speed figure yet. And Punch Bowl's actually posted the best speed figure of the group. So, certainly I think an interesting dynamic. Sarah, intrigued by where you think you're going to be going as in terms of maybe a pick in this one or some value potentially underneath if you see one of these short price favorites being the winner.
I mean, I think I would be more inclined to go with Punch Bowl because of the way that it's likely to set up for her with her controlling this race. But I wish the horse that ran second to her, She's Looking Lucky,
Yes.
did a little bit better last time
Yeah.
in the fantasy. I know that Brad Cox is purposely keeping Wet Paint and Punch Bowl separate, which just like the two inanimate objects coming together, I'm gonna mix them up at some point in the future. And I need to know how Wet Paint got her name because it's just a question that plagues me at night. But I wish that horse ran a little bit better last
Yeah.
time, and the fact that she came back and did not really show up, kind of as a second choice and the second likeliest winner to many in the fantasy, it worries me. However, I mean, it's not always indicative of the kind of horse that comes out of that race and what they'll do next time. The company they face is not always going to tell you everything about them. So I'm really curious to see where the board goes with this race, and that's not usually how I like to decide all of my opinions and how I'll bet it, but it's really just who's going to be the favorite, and I'll take the other two because I don't have a super strong opinion with the three of them, and I don't love anybody else, and I wish I did, but I just don't.
Yeah. So my hot take in this one is Wonder Wheel's not very good. And that's my hot take
Oh,
for the day. And
out
I
of the three
will
of them, it's her?
out of her, I just don't think she's very good. I don't. She hasn't beaten
Okay.
anybody, in my opinion. And if you go back and look at that, Alcibiades, I mean, Infinite Diamond is the only horse to come and win next time out of that entire field. And what did she do just recently at the Gulfstream Park Oaks? Finished sixth, finished fourth at the Devonadale, won a listed stakes race. Other than that, you're looking at horses like Chop Chop, who has completely fallen off lately, finishing second in that race. Raging Sea, Jigera, Sabra Tough, Mustang Lady, Boss Lady Bailey. I mean, just a whole lot of nothing, quite frankly. No disrespect to those horses, but it's just they're not next out winners, and they've not been posting anything that's all that impressive. And then you kind of take a look at who she beat in the um, Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies, and you look at a horse like Leave No Trace, who finished second that day, came back to lose the Devonadale by a whopping 65 and 3/4 lengths.
She was
And
awful.
yeah, and there's absolutely zero next out winners out of that group as well. Even a horse like Atomically, who I kind of like, has really not
She's
had a very
also not
good.
good.
She's not. The best horse out of that entire field that day was probably And Tell Me No Lies, the Peter Miller horse that's running out at Santa Anita. I just don't think she hasn't beaten anybody, and that might just speak to the nature of that division more than anything else. But I just have a hard time getting behind Wonder Wheel at 8-5 on the morning line, considering that the horses that she's beaten to this point haven't really shown that much since those races. And I've not seen that progression from her. That was one of those things last year at the Suncoast. Nest took that huge step forward. And I was kind of hoping that either Julia Shining or Wonder Wheel would kind of do the same thing, take a big step forward as a 3-year-old. Neither of them did. I'm willing to go with Punchbowl in this one. I will say, in a little bit of a surprising upset, I do like a Ken McPeak course a little bit in this race. Defining Purpose. I stopped the presses, I know. But I think Defining Purpose is an interesting horse who is going to get a decent track to run on, has run on those sloppy sealed tracks out at Oaklawn the last couple of times out, and has run competitively to a horse that you mentioned, Wet Paint, who is kind of right now one of the top contenders for the Kentucky Oaks. Taxed, who is, finished second in the fantasy and has finished second in the Martha Washington, and so I think, ran right behind the two of them in that Martha Washington. So I think that's a horse that at least has a decent race in her at 15-1. I'm willing to take a shot, use that horse underneath in an exacta trifecta sort of thing, just so it's not so chalky up top. But yeah, I'll go with Punchbowl on this one. It will be interesting. I agree with you to see where the board is going to go. Well,
And I wonder
yeah,
too, and sorry to interrupt you,
no,
but
no,
just go
no.
back to that really quickly.
Yeah,
I wonder too if they'll also take a look at the fact that Julia Shining has at least defeated Affirmative Lady, who is a horse that
yeah.
did at least come back to win, unlike some of these other horses that the other two shorter prices have been facing that, relatively speaking, have not done much to impress since then. So
No.
we'll see. We'll see.
Absolutely right. That's a great point about Affirmative Lady, who really just did turn in a very nice effort. And so, yeah, Sarah, listen, thank you so much for joining me on this graded stakes preview for opening day at Keeneland. Let the folks know what you're doing, what you're up to these days up at Naira. What's going on up there? Is it going to be nice weather for the Wood Memorial this weekend at Aqueduct? Are we actually going to get a decent day in New York?
The odds are not always in our favor for that, but it looks like it's going to rain tomorrow. Tomorrow being Thursday, as of this recording. So Saturday it looks like we're clear. Not exactly warm spring weather, but not the worst cold for New York. So it shouldn't be too bad. But things are going well at Naira so far. You can catch me on Talking Horses occasionally. Otherwise, I am hiding in the depths of Aqueduct, helping put together pieces for the America's Day at the Races show. So if you see something on there that's misspelled, it's likely my fault.
Well, don't blow up her DMs with that. Just make sure to check her out on Talking Horses. It's always a blast to see you on that, talking to either Stabile or Serling. And it's great to see you doing that stuff up at Naira, and really thrilled to have you on. So, Sarah, thank you again. And thank you all for tuning in and checking out this opening day Keeneland Graded Stakes preview. Make sure to press that like button. Make sure to subscribe, comment below with who you like in this race, and make sure to follow me on Twitter at the handle at Failed to Menace. Well, until next time, friends, I'm your host, Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and prosperous day at the races and reminding you that it's now post time.